Discover the electrifying rise of Gilbert Perreault, the hypnotic stick handler who turned Buffalo into hockey heaven and rewrote the NHL record book with nothing but a hand-me-down stick and unstoppable flair. From backyard ice in Victoriaville, Quebec, to the deafening roar of Memorial Auditorium, Perreault's journey is a masterclass in speed, elegance, and sheer competitive fire. This video dives deep into his 17-year reign as the original Sabre, the birth of the iconic French Connection line, and the unforgettable 1975 Fog game that stamped Buffalo's passport to hockey greatness. Whether you're a die-hard Sabres fan, an NHL history buff, or simply love underdog stories told with cinematic punch, hit play, and relive every pirouette, every laser wrist shot, and every jaw-dropping assist that made Perreault a first-ballot Hall of Famer. Like, subscribe, and join us on a journey where finesse meets grit, and where a shy French-Canadian kid became the enduring heartbeat of Western New York hockey. Gilbert Perreault was born on November 13, 1950, in the paper mill town of Victoriaville, Quebec, to Alcide and Florence Perreault, the second of 4 children, and the only one who could make a frozen pond feel like a stage. He learned to balance on blades almost before he could print his name, pushing a hand-me-down, stick across backyard ice until the hem of his coat froze into a stiff halo. By 6, local coaches were whispering that the boy had ankles made of ball bearings and wrists that could hypnotize the puck, and when the church bell rang to call kids home for supper, Gilbert was still out there, circling his reflections in the sheet of ice as if chasing a phantom twin. He practiced alone long after friends disappeared, experimenting with tight rope edges and heel drag pivots no one had taught him. Sometimes he closed his eyes, trusting muscle memory the way a blind pianist trusts the keys, and mapped the rink by echo, the scrape of his blades, the muted thud of snowbanks, the whistle of wind funneling between boarded fences. Victoriaville in the 1950s smelled of pine pulp and wood smoke, and money stretched thin. Alcide drove trucks for the mill, Florence stitched uniforms for the local senior club, and every winter they surrendered a corner of the yard to a makeshift rink flooded nightly with hose water. The family's only luxury was time spent together, gathered around an old Philco radio to hear play-by-play from Montreal. Jean Béliveau's name floated through the static like scripture, and little Gilbert would trace imaginary routes on the linoleum kitchen floor when Foster Hewitt shouted a Canadian's goal. He studied the cadence of those calls, the crescendo of crowd roar, and pledged to create his own soundtrack someday. On school notebooks, he doodled scoring charts instead of arithmetic, listing pretend assists beside his own name, Perreault from Béliveau and Richard, and then graded himself higher than any teacher ever could. Neighborhood pickup games offered his first audience. Older boys, wary of being embarrassed, tried to slash his stick or pin him along wooden boards, but Gil refused to yield contact. He learned to roll his shoulders inside hits, to absorb force and spin out the other side like a spring-loaded toy. One frosty Saturday, he darted through 4 defenders, executed a full 360 at the hash marks, and shoveled a blind backhand under the crossbar. Silence. Then someone muttered, "Il danse." He dances. The nickname stuck locally, Le Danseur, even before he could spell it. At 14, he joined the Victoriaville Bruins of the Quebec Junior Circuit, slotting at center between line mates 2 years older. Coaches expected polite deference. Gil offered polite domination. He paced the league in scoring, and when he wasn't breaking goal lights, he was pretending they were still broken, so he could practice finishing in darkness. Scouts from Montreal, Boston, and Toronto began driving icy highways to watch him flick wrist shots that started mid-forehand and released off the toe, as if the puck had its own afterburners. They scribbled explosive first 3 strides, panoramic vision, and handles puck like it owes him money. By 17, he was drafted to the Montreal Junior Canadiens in the Ontario Hockey Association, packing a battered suitcase, a French-English dictionary, and a promise to his mother to call Sunday nights. He roomed with Rick Lalonde in a cramped billet above a bakery that made the early mornings smell like cinnamon and yeast, and he woke daily at dawn to run sidewalk sprints, dodging milkmen and stray dogs. Training camp scrimmages turned into personal showcases. One practice he deked a defenseman twice, Coach Roger Bedard blew the whistle, skated over, and asked, half annoyed, half awestruck, "Did you just beat him on purpose so you could embarrass him twice?" Gil shrugged, shy grin translating for his limited English. Not embarrass, just repeat the feel of perfection. That 1969-70 season, he detonated the OH day, recording 121 points in 54 games, 51 goals, 70 assists. Opponents tried double-shifting checking lines, planting defensemen at each blue line like customs officers, but Gil breezed through with counterfeit passports of misdirection. Play-by-play, announcers ran out of vocabulary. They began borrowing dance terms, plié, pirouette, to describe his inside-edge cuts. The press labeled him Le Fantôme, because he appeared, vanished, and reappeared behind the net before you processed the blur. One Toronto columnist wrote, "He skates like he's late for tomorrow," and Punch Imlach, freshly hired to build a newborn NHL franchise in Buffalo, circled those words in red ink and underlined them 3 times. The 1970 NHL Amateur Draft, held at Montreal's Queen Elizabeth Hotel, used a carnival-style wheel to determine whether Buffalo or fellow expansion sibling Vancouver would pick first. Imlach glared at the wheel as if he could hypnotize it, muttering, "Come on, Gil," under his breath. The arrow clicked past Vancouver's number by a single notch and stopped on Buffalo's. In that tacky hotel ballroom, a half-century of Sabres history took its first heartbeat. Reporters scrambled to phone stories. Imlach clutched a cigar and exhaled a smoke ring shaped like a grin. Back in Victoriaville, Alcide Perreault turned up the radio, caught the announcement in French and muttered, "Buffalo? Où ça?" Where's that? It didn't matter. His son was going pro. Training camp in September introduced Gil to culture shock. He spoke halting English. "Hello, my name Gil. I play center." And the Sabres dressing room thundered with Western New York accents, country rock songs, and steelworker jokes. He responded with quiet focus, lacing skates exactly the same way each day, left lace over right, always tied by pulling from the middle eyelet, sharpening his own blades after practice to a 5/8 hollow, and arriving early enough to tape 2 sticks while humming French lullabies. Veterans like Floyd Smith teased him about being too courteous. "Kid, you say please more than you say puck." But when exhibition games started, no one teased anymore. His debut shift, intercept a pass in the neutral zone, chip it around a flat-footed defenseman, outrace him, fake forehand, snap glove side. Goal, 30 seconds in, 1 shot, eternal optimism. October 10th, 1970, Sabres' first regular season game at Pittsburgh's Civic Arena found Gil lined up against Penguin center Brian Hextall. The puck dropped, Gil won the draw clean, and within 9 minutes he buried his first NHL goal, a rolling snapshot that hissed past veteran goalie Les Binkley. Buffalo lost 2-1, but Western New York newspapers treated the lone Sabres tally like a prophecy. Gil finished the season with 38 goals, an NHL rookie record at the time, plus 34 assists for 72 points. He collected the Calder Trophy at a Montreal gala, stammering thank yous in 2 languages, cheeks crimson as stage lights. Buffalo fans, steelworkers, and teachers and grocery clerks felt chosen. Every ticket purchased was now a front-row seat to revolution. They nicknamed him the Original Sabre, a moniker that sounded like both pioneer and sword. Numbers undersold the show. One early December night against Detroit, he banked a pass to himself off the end boards, spun 360 degrees to evade a hip check, then deked goalie Roy Edwards twice, dragging the puck across the paint like a calligrapher finishing a signature. Writers invented a phrase, the Perreault pirouette. Local kids tried it on outdoor rinks, twisting ankles and laughing. Buffalo's brain trust knew he needed running mates. In 1971, the Sabres drafted Rick Martin, a stocky, rocket-wristed left winger from Verdun. A year later, they traded for René Robert, a sleek right wing with a sprinter's stride and a release like cracking ice. The French connection formed organically. 3 Quebecers, 3 Francophones, 3 players whose styles dovetailed like jazz. Practices looked choreographed, but they weren't. Gill would curl low in his zone, scoop the puck in a lacrosse wobble on the heel of his stick, accelerate through center. And as defensemen collapsed on him, he'd dump a no-look pass onto Robert's tape, who in turn feathered a cross-ice laser to Martin, who roofed a slap shot before goalies finished blinking. During the 1972-73 campaign, that line combined for 296 points. Gill had 88, 28 goals, 60 assists, and only 10 penalty minutes, good for the Lady Byng Trophy. He won sportsmanship honors without sacrificing intensity, proof that elegance and edge could share the same skate blades. Buffalo started believing in more than highlight reels. The 1974-75 season produced 49 wins, second most in the league, and a fan culture equal parts blue-collar grit and opera appreciation. They wore face paint, rang cowbells, and taught themselves Allez les Sabres chants to honor French heroes. Quarterfinals, Sabres swept the Chicago Blackhawks, Gill scoring the series-clinching goal on a breakaway so swift, the TV cameraman jerked the lens left too late. Semifinals, Buffalo outlasted the defending champion Montreal Canadiens in 6 games, Gill potting 2 goals and assisting on 5, often matched against Guy Lafleur and Jacques Lemaire. Lafleur later quipped, "You chase Gill and realize you're skating uphill. He sees valleys where we see walls." Then came the Stanley Cup Final versus the Flyers, notorious Broad Street bullies with fists on retainer. Game 3 at Memorial Auditorium produced one of hockey's strangest spectacles. A freak indoor fog caused by 85-degree humidity outside and an ice plant near meltdown. Officials paused action repeatedly so players could skate figure eights to disperse clouds. At times, goalies disappeared behind vapor curtains. Mid-overtime, Perreault circled behind Bernie Parent's net, bumped off Ed Van Impe, and flicked a point-blank backhand under Parent's glove. Half the audience never saw the puck until the red light stabbed the haze, but they heard the eruption, a roar amplified by metal rafters pounding with decades of civic yearning. Buffalo would eventually fall in 6 games, undone by Philly grit and timely snarl, yet the city wore the loss like a badge of arrival. Their team, their wizard, had taken them to dream brink. The late 70s cemented Perreault's virtuoso reputation. In 1975-76, he amassed 113 points, smashing franchise records and finishing second to Lafleur's 125 in the league scoring race. He posted a +63 rating, and his defensive backchecks earned quiet nods from old-school critics who once doubted his toughness. He wasn't a hitter, but he didn't shirk corners. He deadened blows by rolling shoulders and used quick reverse cuts to absorb contact. Coaches studied his weight transfer, noticing he kept knees flexed like a slalom skier, ready to recoil into acceleration. Modern analysts call it deceleration control, but he discovered it on a frozen pond chasing his own shadow. In 1978-79, his 44 goals placed him in the top 5 league-wide, trailing only Mike Bossy's blistering 69. Sabres color commentator Rick Jeanneret screamed, "Get in there!" So often it became Gill's unofficial ringtone. Jeanneret's other catchphrase, "Top shelf, where mama hides the cookies," found meaning each time Perreault sizzled a wrist shot just under the bar, blocker side, in a blur that looked digitally edited before digital existed. The following season, he notched 106 points, 40 goals, 66 assists, despite missing stretches with achy knees. Strength coaches prescribed stationary bikes and cold water baths. Gill preferred long walks around Lake Erie marinas at dusk, believing the mind's calm could coax musculature into harmony. International stages highlighted his cerebral prowess. He accepted a roster spot on Team Canada for the 1972 Summit Series after Coach Harry Sinden watched one scrimmage and jotted, "Handles Soviets in space." Gill centered a line with Ivan Cournoyer and Paul Henderson, tasked with disrupting the Soviets' tic-tac-toe rhythms while fueling Canadian counters. In Game 2, he pounced on a loose puck in the slot, waited a full heartbeat for Vladislav Tretiak to commit, and then zipped a low-wrister blocker side. The Maple Leaf Gardens crowd exploded, and Gill's grin looked half disbelief, half satisfaction. Canada ultimately eked out a 4-3-1 series victory on Henderson's heroic Game 8 goal, but inside the dressing room, veterans whispered that Perreault's controlled exits under heavy forecheck had stabilized the early panic. 4 years later, at the inaugural 1976 Canada Cup, Gil posted 8 points in 7 games. Coach Scotty Bowman deployed him as Bobby Orr's unofficial puck chauffeur. Whenever Orr, skating on a bum knee, needed relief in transition, he shoveled the disc to Perreault, who would sift through neutral zone traffic like a commuter weaving motorcycles between cars. In the final, against Czechoslovakia, Gil assisted on Orr's overtime winner by drawing 2 defenders wide and sliding a diagonal pass back through the slot. Reverse magnetism at its finest. Teammates swore you could hear defenders groan each time his blades bit into fresh ice. Meanwhile, his role in Buffalo evolved. When Jerry Meehan retired, coach Marcel Pronovost handed the captain's C to Perreault in 1981. He accepted with characteristic modesty, saying in halting English, "I tried lead by skate." Lead he did, mentoring rookies like Dave Andrechuk, who once walked into the captain's stall after practice to thank him for a perfect cross-slot dish the night before. Gil waved him off. "Next time, you pass to me." It was his way of saying reciprocity fuels chemistry. He scheduled team dinners at a small Italian bistro on Hurdle Avenue, where he insisted everyone, rookie to veteran, order the same bottle of red wine so they could toast as equals. But mileage accumulates even on gifted engines. Perreault's right knee, battered by myriad scissor stops, began aching louder than applause. In 1981-82, he still punched in 31 goals and 39 assists. But off days found him icing joints, stretching hamstrings in steam rooms, and telling trainers in whispered French, "If my head forgets the trick, my heart remembers." The team missed the cup window, falling in early rounds to emerging dynasties, the Islanders, then the Oilers. Gil faced Wayne Gretzky for the first time in 1980 and detected embryonic brilliance, later remarking, "Wayne sees ice differently, like he stands on balcony above play." Gretzky replied in interviews, "I idolized Perreault. He had the best hands I'd ever seen." By 1985-86, the burst that once separated him from time itself flickered. Still, he produced 53 points, including a between-the-legs circus goal against Boston that made even Bruins enforcer Terry O'Reilly tap his stick in grudging salute. Then came November 24th, 1986. Buffalo hosted the Canadiens, lost 3-2, and afterward Perreault lingered on the ice alone, gliding slow circles, surveying empty blue seats. Reporters thought he was cooling down. He was saying goodbye. Next morning, he stepped into GM Scotty Bowman's office, placed his Bauer skates on the desk, and, voice barely audible, said in French, "La magie n'est plus instantanée." The magic isn't instant anymore. Bowman nodded, shook his hand, and issued a press release hours later. After 1,191 games, all with one club, Gilbert Perreault retired. Those final numbers read like folklore: 512 goals, 814 assists, 1,326 regular season points, 103 points in 90 playoff games, 6 All-Star game appearances, Calder, Lady Byng, innumerable weekly stars. Yet stats fail to capture the intangible electricity. How crowds inhaled when he carried out of his zone. How visiting arenas buzzed in anticipation of plays that might wound their teams, yet justify ticket prices. Retirement did not dull his skates entirely. He returned to Victoriaville, purchased a corner tavern, La Taverne 11, where he served poutine from family recipes, and screened Sabres games on loop. Visiting fans discovered their childhood idol, pouring them Molsons, shyly asking if the gravy needed more pepper. He coached the local midget AAA squad, designed skill ladders using water bottles aligned like chess pieces, and demanded players practice blindfolded stick handling for 30-second bursts. Kids hated it, then loved it. Then realized they were learning spatial awareness decades before it became an analytics buzzword. In the mid-90s, he joined Buffalo's scouting department, zigzagging Quebec barns and rental cars to evaluate talent. One chilly night in Drummondville, he approached 17-year-old Danny Briere outside the bus. "You see holes? Exploit them," he said, tapping Brière's chest. Even small guys can create space if they control tempo. Brière never forgot the advice, later citing it after scoring an overtime playoff winner for the Sabres in 2006. When the franchise unveiled a bronze French Connection statue in 2012, outside then, First Niagara Center, Perreault, Martin, and Robert stood shoulder to shoulder, squinting in the afternoon sun at their immortalized younger selves. Gil leaned into the microphone and joked, "Bringing Rick and Renee back to Buffalo. This time they can't ask for a raise." The crowd erupted, tears mixing with laughter. He autographed ceremony programs until security suggested he stop for dinner. Away from cameras, Gil remains humble. He tends a vegetable garden behind his Quebec home, grows tomatoes the size of pucks, and occasionally mails jars of homemade salsa to former teammates with notes reading, "Try score with this." He golfs in the Laurentians, never keeps official handicap, and refuses mulligans because life has no do-overs. He reads biographies of musicians, Coltrane, Piaf, fascinated by improvisation in other art forms, and claims he once tried to learn saxophone but couldn't figure out how to practice silently at night. During lockdown seasons, he filmed stick-handling tutorials for YouTube from his garage, using tennis balls to teach hand speed. The videos went viral among youth coaches, who clipped segments titled Perreault's Shallow C Cut and The Vision Drill. Even now, franchise records remain stubborn. Pat LaFontaine dazzled, but lasted only 6 Buffalo seasons. Jack Eichel produced highlight reel rushes, yet departed amid contract drama. Emerging superstar Tage Thompson fires one-timers like cannon blasts, but eclipsing 512 goals and 1,326 points requires decade-long consistency. Analytics historians place Perreault's 1.11 points per game in context. Despite playing in an offensively prolific era, he carried an expansion franchise without the Montreal Canadiens' dynastic support or Gretzky's Oilers' juggernaut. His even-strength primary assist percentage ranks near Joe Sakic and Peter Forsberg. His neutral zone carry and success rate, gleaned from painstaking manual video tracking, would top many modern leaders. He was a futurist wearing leather gloves, stitched in 1970.